think first what we need to address, just from the top down, I gave a very brief overview, one sentence description of what the red-green axis or the red-green alliance is. It's the joint efforts between communism and Islam, essentially to subvert the West, this Judeo-Christian West, to subvert freedom and everything that we hold dear. But that's, pretty broad. Anybody want to start with, is that a fair description, or what did I miss?
Well, can I try what you missed?
Please.
I think it's a very fair description of what we're facing as far as it goes. We're clearly beset by, as you mentioned, the Chinese Communist Party and its friends elsewhere around the world and here, the red. I have a phrase that my colleagues sometimes agree with, sometimes don't, that characterizes the green as Sharia supremacists. They're, of course, Muslims, but they adhere to this doctrine of Sharia, and they seek to impose it on everybody else. And that's the case whether they are elsewhere in the world or whether they are here. And both are present in very large numbers, of course. But I just add into the mix what might be called the blue, just to keep things interesting. This is kind of the totalitarian trifecta, because there is, in addition to the red, the communists, the green, the Sharia supremacists, the globalists, who are also elsewhere and here, and also very hard at work, as are the other two, at accomplishing what I think is their shared immediate objective. Their longer term purposes, as I'm sure we will be talking about for most of the evening, are very different. They each envision running everything. They all won't be able to do that, of course. But in the meantime, in order to realize any of their ambitions, they have to get rid of the only real impediment to them, which is us, the United States of America. So I salute you for putting this program on. Karen is a godsend, frankly, for our cause. And these programs, which I've had a privilege of being involved in for some time, are, I think, incredibly important. So I'm glad you're here for this one, especially with two of the best in the business, my friends, Robert and Trevor. Over to you guys.
Yeah. And thank you for putting that in the context, because they are all tied together, those all three colors. And it's impossible to separate them. Yes. Trevor, you're looking like...
Oh, well, I thought Robert would go next, but look, this is what I'll say. Communism is a religion masquerading as a political ideology. Sharia, Islam, is a political ideology masquerading as a religion.
That's right.
And I think this is a key point to remember. These are ideologies, and if I'm going to fault President Trump on foreign policy, I think his big failure is that he doesn't understand ideology. He thinks that everybody is susceptible to a deal, that if you offer the right incentives, if you offer deals that'll make the people wealthier, they will go for it, because that's how he thinks. That's how the business community thinks. But when you're talking about Sharia 12 as in Iran, their whole life revolves around bringing chaos to the world so their 12th imam can come back. They don't care about a hotel in Tehran. They don't care about more money. Their whole life revolves around that. Someone like Putin, for instance, you do a deal with Putin. He's an ideological guy raised in the KGB, inspired by the Eurasianist and neo-communist philosophies. He doesn't want a hotel in Moscow. He wants to be the new Peter the Great. He wants to be the new Stalin. He wants to go down in history as the man who brought back the Soviet Union. The same with this Communist Party of China. They believe in Marxism, Leninism, and Han supremacy. They believe in the great destiny of the Han Chinese people and the destiny of Marxism, Leninism. You cannot do a deal with ideological people. You can only be stronger and defeat them and get them out of power. You're not supposed to talk about regime change. I'm all for regime change in Iran. Wouldn't regime change in 1940 Germany have been a good thing, folks? Don't you think it might have helped the world a little bit? Well, I'm all about regime change in Iran. I'm all about regime change in Russia, all about regime change in China and Nicaragua and Venezuela and Cuba. And we don't have to spend blood to do it. We just have to stop paying their bills. Mm-hmm. And their own people will do the job for us.
Yeah.
Amen. Well said.
Robert. Yes.
Frank added a third color to the mix, and I'm actually going to mix them all together because it's all actually the same impulse. I think ultimately what we're dealing with are sharks. They are the sharks of human culture. They have to move forward and devour others or die. Now, this is something that they all have in common. Marxism, in the first place, is explicitly and proudly aggressive, expansionist, and imperialist because, of course, of the stated idea that the workers must prevail everywhere and the workers' paradise of the proletariat, the dictatorship of the proletariat, established. Now, that's all well and good, but what the reality is that once you have enslaved and impoverished a people, your economy will collapse unless you can conquer another land and enslave and impoverish those people. And then you have a chance to perpetuate it. And so what really happened with the collapse of the Soviet bloc was that they were not expanding and had bled dry all the territories they controlled, and thus could not keep up with Reagan's economic agenda and collapsed. Now, Islam is exactly the same. Islam is the shark of human cultures for 1400 years because the idea in Islam is that there is no work ethic. You may have heard or maybe even read the book, The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism. Mm. It's a book by the German sociologist Max Weber, who was not a Protestant, who was studying what made cultures be prosperous. And he postulated, rightly or wrongly, that it was the idea of human work as being blessed by God that the Protestants emphasized that allowed for the Protestant nations to prosper economically in a way that others did not. Now, I'm not saying that that's right or wrong, but I do think that there is a connection between core beliefs and the economies of those who hold those beliefs. When you come to Islam, there is no blessing to work. Work is actually a dishonor. If you're going to be working, it's because you don't own slaves. And if you don't own slaves, it's because you have not been a warrior and captured any slaves, or you don't have money to buy any. And so you are a dishonorable person. If there are no slaves to buy, and if there are no subjugated non-Muslims to do the work, then the economy goes into free fall. And I have a book coming out next spring called The Tragedy of Islam, Failure and Excuses that traces the decline and fall of the Ottoman Empire on the basis of its having bled the Dhimmi communities dry. And thus, they didn't work, the Turks. I mean, obviously, some of them did, and they did as much as they had to. But the whole idea of the state was that the Jews and Christians would work and pay the Muslims. And once they were impoverished and they had been bled dry and were no longer prosperous, the empire went into decline. So then you have jihad. They have to conquer more lands so as to keep it going. And it's the same thing, thus, as communism. So what we're dealing with are 2 or 3 variations of cultural sharks that have to devour us in order to survive and keep moving in that regard. And so they will not rest. I suppose the fundamental lesson is they're not going to sit down at a table and negotiate a settlement that's going to make peace. They'll just keep coming because that's what sharks do. Sharks don't have a talk with the halibut and say, okay, I'll leave you alone because we'll sign this paper.
Right.
Doesn't happen.